Hi, today's stories are taken from r/LetsNotMeet, and posted by u/Valerian Jedi. A strange man hunted me through a national park. I posted this story in a thread on a Nature Pics subreddit and was told I should post it somewhere like this. I was camping in the middle of nowhere in Washington near Mount Rainier. Like, not an official campground, just way out in the forest where I wouldn't have expected another human for miles. One night I wake up and hear something, open my tent, and there is a guy sitting by where my fire had been right outside my tent. Nothing particularly noteworthy about the guy, just a fairly regular looking dude just sitting there a couple feet from my tent. No bag or pack or anything with him, just a guy. He saw me open the tent, his eyes got huge like he had just seen a ghost, and he took off. It shook me up pretty badly, but over the next day I managed to put it out of my mind fairly well after writing it off as just some odd occurrence and a guy that was probably high or something and had somehow managed to set up a camp coincidentally not far from mine. Then 2 days after that, and 10 to 15 miles away in totally random directions that nobody could take the same path as on accident, I was sitting by the fire that night and started hearing noises that I got more and more convinced were a person. I called out to them and out of the darkness someone was like, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" I said no. I don't even think that's a real place there. They kept talking from just out of my line of vision. I tried to see them with my flashlight but they yelled aim that away and, kind of spooked and not wanting to piss off a potentially crazy person, I did. After like 15 minutes of me being very freaked out and them talking and asking completely random questions from the darkness, it sounded like the voice had gotten closer, so I shined my light that way again, and it was the same dude who had been outside my tent 2 nights before. He had to have followed me almost 15 miles over 2 days because there is no way he could have just accidentally wound up in the same spot as vast as that wilderness is. No possible way. As soon as my light hit him, he took off again. I started to chase him but didn't want to get lost in the wilderness in the dark, so stopped quickly after probably only 100 to 200 feet. This one couldn't be written off, because the only way he could have been in both places is specifically if he was following me. I decided the trip was very over first thing in the morning and hiked back out over 3 days, constantly doubling back, trying to throw anyone following off my trail, and occasionally hiding and waiting to see if he would come by following me. I really can't describe how terrifying it was to feel like I was being hunted through the woods, and to actually have to brainstorm on things I could do to best avoid potentially being murdered. On the first night of hiking out, twice I heard what sounded like a person walking circles outside my tent. But by the time I mustered the courage to look, nobody was there. On the second night I heard what I thought was an animal making noises at first in the distance, but slowly decided sounded more like a human making animal calls, but could have actually been an animal, but I didn't actually see the guy again. But it really sounded like a person making howling noises. I literally almost cried when I finally got back to my car. The relief was so strong. To this day, probably the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I have no idea who the guy was or what his intentions were and no way of getting an explanation, but I really can't articulate just what a terrifying few days it was. Now, this story is posted by u/Marshall_McCauckless_. I suddenly realize the noise is breathing, and it is getting louder. Then it's right on top of me. This story is from my days as a gas station clerk. I have tons of stories, but most of them are just a little bizarre or sometimes funny. There were a few eerie moments, but this was the only time I was genuinely fucking scared. This happened during a football Saturday, so the store was full of people from the moment I walked in. Most of the night is a blur because it was just cashiering for the first 6 hours of my shift. It was around 3 a.m. and things were finally starting to taper off. There were only a dozen or so people in the store. I usually just kept my head down and focused on the transaction in front of me so I wouldn't get overwhelmed, only looking up now and then to make sure the store isn't on fire and no one stealing the wine case. I wasn't even looking around when I saw him. I just saw something strange in the corner of my eye and spun my head to look at him. When I got a good look, I was startled. Both of his eyes were completely red, like wet cherry tomatoes bulging out of his face. I have never seen anything like them since. His skin was almost translucent white and he was soaking wet. His teeth were gritted and looked too big for his mouth. He was shaking as he fast walked past the counter. I could hear the bathroom door slam from around the corner. I went back to my transaction and told myself that I needed to remember exactly where he was. I couldn't forget he was in the bathroom. I rang out the next few people, watching for him the whole time. After another 10 minutes or so, the store was suddenly empty. Customer rushes tend to be like that, from 100 miles an hour to just nothing. I knew he was still in the bathroom. I thought about going to knock, but I felt repelled. You can call me a coward, but I know exactly how 5'6" doughy and totally alone I am when I'm at work. I had no intention of going near that door. This is where things get stupid on my part. It's difficult to capture exactly what my thought process was. Partly it was paranoia. I was telling myself maybe this guy had a gun or a knife, and he might run out of the bathroom and murder me. This is definitely not going to happen, but the scariness outweighed the probability. On the other end of the fear spectrum, there's the part of me saying you've worked this kind of job for 2 years now, nothing bad ever happens. You are making a big deal out of nothing. This seemed fair. People have threatened to jump the counter, to follow me home or to wait until I get off work, and it never happens. If I genuinely believed bad things would happen, I wouldn't be willing to work minimum wage to spend all night alone here. I look at the clock and it's nearing 4 a.m., which is when I need to start brewing coffee for it to be ready when my manager comes in. The coffee grounds are all in the supply closet behind the counter, so I tell myself it's totally fine to go get them. It satisfies both my paranoia and my arrogance as well. I'm still doing my job, but doing something I believe to be tactically the best move. If for whatever reason the guy opened the bathroom door and tried to run behind the counter and murder me, I could shut the door and lock it from the inside. Besides, the bathroom doors are old and loud. I can easily hear them open from inside the closet, so I can just come out and wait near This all seemed like a very good idea at the time. So I decide to go get the coffee packets and I'm listening carefully while I load up on all the flavors I need. I figure I will only be a minute so I don't even turn the lights on. I'm listening carefully and I don't hear anything. I still don't hear anything. Then I hear a weird noise. It sounds like the water pipes in the back hissing at first, but it's too ragged. I suddenly realize the noise is breathing, and it is getting louder. Then it's right on top of me. Oh shit, I tell myself. I need to get out of this closet right now. That's when I stood and turned to leave, and saw him in the doorframe. In that moment I remember thinking to myself, oh my god, I am so stupid. I am going to die and it will be all my fault. Later when my manager reviewed the footage, she saw him leave the bathroom by slowly pushing the door open. Without making a sound he had wandered behind the counter and peeked into her office, stepping in far enough to trigger the automatic light. After that, he had wandered behind the food service counter, before making his way to the open supply closet door. The next thing she saw on camera was me flipping the fuck out. I stepped backwards, my body shaking so hard my knees almost buckled. I remember my potential last words, bellowed in a trembly Count Chocula voice. I had shouted Jesus fucking Christ. At this point I think he realized how absolutely horrifying this entire scenario was to me. He put up his hands and started apologizing awkwardly. He was really twitchy, still gritting his teeth, and his eyes were still bright red. I basically went on autopilot for a moment and said I wouldn't talk to him until he got out from behind the counter area. He walked backwards until he was barely on the other side of the employees only entrance, standing next to the soda machine. He began asking for an iPhone charger, telling me he was lost. He said he had no money and just needed to charge his phone here until he could call for help. I told him I don't have an iPhone charger and I couldn't help him. He sighed and looked down for a moment, seeming to think about what to do. Then he flipped his head back and screamed as loud as he could. Fuck. Fuck. Fuck fuck. He screamed, and punched the soda machine, hard. I backed up and ran around the counter, up to where the panic button was under the register. I watched him as he walked around the store, punching the walls and kicking the counters and screaming. I heard myself shouting over and over. Get the fuck out of here. Get out right now or I'm calling 911. Get out of here right fucking now. After a second he stopped and turned around to look at me. He quietly apologized before wandering out of the store and running off into the dark. At this point I was shaking, but tried to pick up and keep working. I started brewing the coffee, checking the windows to see if he was out in the parking lot, but I couldn't see him. After another few minutes a regular came in and told me a strange man had come up to him asking for a ride. He said the guy was soaked and his eyes were bright red. That's when I decided to call the police. They found him in the parking lot next door, screaming and punching the moving trucks. They took him to sober up and calm down. They informed me that he was very sorry for losing his cool, he was just very drunk and very lost. He had come from out of state for the game and got separated from his friends. Another regular assured me I was an idiot for going into a small room with one exit, nowhere near a panic button, when I thought there might be a dangerous person in the store. I totally deserved that. In the end nothing bad happened, but it made me realize that something easily could have. To Mr. Red Eyes, I'm really sorry you had such a shitty night and hopefully you got home without issue. Thank you for making me realize I'm not as safe as I think. Anyone could have come into the supply closet that night so I guess I'm glad it was you, no matter how much you fucking scared me.
Thanks for watching. Please do like, share, comment and subscribe for more videos.